This is the case of Raynella Leith, a woman who got away with taking the lives of her two husbands. Raynella Dossett Leith's life once appeared to be that of a high-achieving Southern woman, respected in the medical field, married to a prominent district attorney, and living on an idyllic farm outside Knoxville, Tennessee. But beneath the serene exterior lay a series of tragedies, betrayals, and bizarre twists that would eventually thrust her into the national spotlight. Her story is one of death, suspicion, and courtroom drama that spans over 2 decades. A tale with more questions than answers, and a legal saga that remains one of the most controversial in Tennessee's history. Born on October 25, 1948, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Raynella Bernardine Large was the daughter of Dewey Ernest Large, a nuclear scientist working in the secretive and prestigious Manhattan Project Tarrytown, and Annie Irene Owens. She grew up surrounded by intellectualism and order. Raynella graduated from Oak Ridge High School in 1966, then pursued a career in nursing, a choice that would later take on a dark irony as her knowledge of medicine and drugs became central to multiple criminal investigations. Her life changed significantly when she married Edward Ed Dossett in 1970, a man on the rise in Tennessee legal circles. As Knox County's District Attorney General, Ed was powerful and respected, making Raynella one half of a local power couple. Together, they had 3 children and settled on a sprawling farm in the countryside. To outsiders, they were the portrait of Southern success. But that picture would slowly begin to unravel. In the early 1990s, Ed Dossett was battling terminal cancer, a painful and public decline. But in July 1992, before cancer could claim him, he was found dead under highly unusual circumstances. According to Raynella, he had been trampled by cattle in their farm's corral. The story raised eyebrows, but the initial investigation resulted in a ruling of accidental death, a freak agricultural tragedy. However, there were whispers. Most unsettling detail was a double indemnity clause in Ed's life insurance policy, which would pay out substantially more if the death were accidental. Despite the suspicion, the case was closed, and just 6 months later, Raynella remarried. Her new husband was David Leith, a retired barber. To some, the rapid remarriage felt abrupt. To others, it was a woman trying to move forward after tragedy. But as time passed, the wounds left by Ed's mysterious death remained open and would resurface with devastating consequences. Now, let's explore the second death. On March 13, 2003, Raynella called 911 to report that her second husband, David Leith, was dead. She claimed to have found him in their bed, apparently having shot himself in a suicide. Police arrived and immediately noticed inconsistencies. Most notably, David had been shot 3 times, an unusual detail in suicide cases. Investigators concluded the fatal shot was the second, raising the question, why were there 3 shots fired? Even more suspicious was the presence of sedatives in his system, drugs typically used in surgery, not found in everyday households. Investigators began to suspect foul play. They theorized that David had been drugged to the point of immobility and then shot, not once, but multiple times. The initial narrative of suicide began to crumble under forensic scrutiny. This launched a deeper probe into Raynella's past, and what they uncovered shocked even seasoned investigators. In the years following Ed Dossett's death, Raynella discovered a painful secret. Ed had engaged in an affair with Kay Clift Walker, who was then going through a divorce. That affair had resulted in a child, a revelation that reportedly devastated Raynella. Consumed by rage or humiliation, or both, Raynella contacted Steve Walker, Kay's estranged husband. She invited him to her farm, and once he arrived, she opened fire. She allegedly kept shooting until she ran out of bullets. Walker survived. Raynella was charged with attempted murder but struck a plea deal for a lesser charge. She served 6 years on probation, and the incident was quietly swept under the rug and her record expunged. But this violent episode would later be used to paint her as a woman, capable of extreme vengeance and manipulation. Raynella was charged with the murder of David Leith in 2008. Her first trial in 2009 ended in a hung jury. After extended deliberations, jurors were deadlocked, unable to agree on whether the physical evidence and motive were sufficient for a conviction. A retrial began in 2010 with dramatic flair. The prosecution played Raynella's 911. call for the jury and outlined their theory that David Leith had been sedated and executed. They painted her as a cold, calculating killer, someone who had already gotten away with one suspicious death and an attempted murder. The defense took a surprising approach. Instead of arguing that David had killed himself, they claimed his death was a homicide, but insisted Raynella wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. They presented an alibi and pointed to the lack of direct evidence tying her to the murder weapon. This time, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. Raynella was sentenced to life in prison. Following the conviction, charges in Ed Dossett's now reopened death investigation were dropped. Raynella's legal team appealed the conviction, citing serious misconduct by Judge Richard Baum. The judge had been secretly battling a drug addiction while overseeing multiple major cases, including Raynella's. The Tennessee courts had already overturned several convictions due to his behavior, including the infamous Christian Newsom murder case. Raynella's appeal worked. In 2016, after serving several years in prison, she was granted release pending a third trial scheduled for January 20, 2017. During this trial, something extraordinary happened. Special Judge Paul Summers, brought in from outside the local judiciary, listened to the case, reviewed the evidence, and decided that the prosecution had failed to meet the burden of proof. Without allowing the jury to deliberate, he issued a directed verdict, a legal rarity in murder trials. Acquitting Raynella then and there, after nearly 15 years of courtroom battles, Raynella walked free. Her record was cleared, and the remaining charges related to both her husband's deaths were dismissed. Raynella Dossett Leith now lives in relative obscurity, her freedom intact but her reputation forever shadowed. The deaths of Ed Dossett and David Leith remain officially closed but deeply controversial to this day. Many question whether justice was truly served, or if Raynella was a brilliant manipulator who managed to escape the full weight of the law. Others argue she was a scapegoat, the victim of overzealous prosecution and circumstantial evidence. What is undeniable is this: Raynella's story is a dark tapestry of betrayal, power, mystery, and the limits of the justice system. Thanks for watching.